lies and slogans such as human world Buddhism and religion is the truth and so is socialism. They claimed there is no contradiction between this shore and the other shore. They encouraged Buddhists and Taoists to pursue happiness, glory, splendor, wealth, and rank in this life, and changed the religious doctrines and their meanings. Buddhism forbids killing, yet the CCP killed people like flies during the suppression of counter-revolutionaries in the early 1950s. In response, the political monks cooked up the absurd justification that killing the counter-revolutionaries is even greater compassion. During the Korean War, which the CCP called the War to Resist U.S. Aggression and Aid Korea, monks were even sent directly to the front line to kill.
宗教界人士也参加捐献飞机大炮的运动。7月22日，中国基督教全国会议在北京召开，指出新中国4年来，基督教进行了自治、自养、自传的反帝爱国运动，以彻底
Take Christianity as another example. In 1950, party-loyal Wu Yaozong formed what was called the Three Self Church. It followed the principles of self-administration, self-support, and self-propagation. He claimed that they would break away from imperialism and join the war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea. A good friend of his was imprisoned for over 20 years for refusing to join his Three Self Church and suffered all kinds of torture and humiliation. When he asked Wu Yaozong, "How do you regard the miracles Jesus performed?" Wu answered, "I have thrown them all out." Not acknowledging Jesus' miracles equates to not acknowledging Jesus' heaven. How can one be counted as a Christian when one does not even recognize the heaven Jesus ascended to? However, Wu Yaozong became the founder of China's official version of Christianity and a member of the Political Consultative Conference Standing Committee. When he stepped into the Great Hall of the People, he must have completely forgotten Jesus' words from the book of Matthew, "Thou shalt love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." The CCP confiscated temple property, forced monks and nuns to study Marxism and Leninism, brainwashed them, and even forced them to hard labor. What is even more absurd is that the CCP encouraged monks and nuns to get married so as to disintegrate Buddhism. For example, just before the March 8 Women's Day in 1951, the Women's Federation in Changsha City, Hunan Province, ordered all nuns in the province to make up their minds to get married in just a few days. In addition, young and healthy monks were forced to join the army and were sent to the battlefield to serve as cannon fodder. Various religious groups in China have disintegrated under the CCP's violent suppression. The genuine elites of Buddhism and Taoism have been suppressed. Among the remaining monks and Taoists, many returned to secular life, and many others were undisclosed Communist Party members who specialized in putting on monks' robes, Taoist robes, or a pastor's long gown to distort the Buddhist scriptures, the Taoist canon, and the Holy Bible, and to look for justification for the CCP's political movements in these doctrines. The last step in destructing a belief and culture is to insult it so that people despise it from then on, preventing it from ever being restored. The CCP considered the traditions of the Hui Muslim group to be one of the four olds: old thought, culture, tradition, and habit. Therefore, it forced the Hui people to eat pork. Muslim peasants and mosques were required to raise pigs, and each household had to furnish 2 pigs to the country every year. The Red Guards even forced the second highest living Tibetan Buddha, the Panchen Lama, to eat human excrement. they ordered 3 monks from the Temple of Bliss, located in Harbin City, Heilongjiang Province, which is the biggest Buddhist temple built in modern times, to hold a poster board that said, "The hell with sutras, they are full of shit." In 1971, the CCP started a frantic movement to criticize Confucius. An author, who wrote under the pen name Liang Xiao, published an article in The Red Flag, the CCP's foremost magazine, entitled, "Who is Confucius?" The article described Confucius as a madman who wanted to turn history backward and a deceptive and shrewd demagogue. A series of cartoons and songs followed, demonizing Confucius. In this way, the dignity and sacredness of religion and culture were annihilated. The characters of the written Chinese language embody the essence of 5,000 years of civilization. Each character's form and pronunciation, and the idioms and literary allusions composed of combinations of the characters, express profound cultural meanings. The CCP has not only simplified the Chinese characters, but also tried to replace them with Romanized pinyin, which would remove all cultural tradition from the Chinese characters and language. But the replacement plan failed, thus sparing further damage to the Chinese language. However, the intellectuals who inherited the same traditional culture were not so fortunate as to be spared destruction. Before the CCP gained power in 1949, China had about 2 million intellectuals. Although some had studied in Western countries, they still inherited some Confucian ideas. The CCP certainly could not relax its control of them, because, as members of the traditional scholar aristocracy class, their ways of thinking played important roles in shaping the thoughts of ordinary people. In September 1951, the CCP initiated a broad thought reform movement, starting in Beijing University among the intellectuals. The intellectuals were required to organize a movement to confess their history, including their thoughts, faithfully and honestly, in attempts to cleanse any counter-revolutionary elements. Mao Zedong never liked intellectuals. He said that they ought to be aware of the truth that actually many so-called intellectuals are, relatively speaking, quite ignorant, and that the workers and farmers sometimes know more than they do. Mao also said, compared with the workers and peasants, to the CCP, the intellectuals are dirty, and in the last analysis, the workers and peasants are the cleanest people, even though their hands are covered with dirt and their feet are smeared with cow dung. The CCP's persecution of intellectuals started with various forms of accusations, ranging from the 1951 criticism of Wu Shun, or running schools with begged money, to Mao Zedong's personal attack in 1955 on writer Hu Feng, a scholar and literary critic, as a counter-revolutionary. In the beginning, the intellectuals were not categorized as a reactionary class, but by 1957, after several major religious groups had surrendered through the Unified Front movement, the CCP could focus its energy on the intellectuals now. The anti-rightist movement, then, was launched. At the end of February 1957, claiming to let 100 flowers bloom and 100 schools of thought contend, the CCP called on intellectuals to voice their suggestions and criticisms of the party, promising no retaliation. These intellectuals had been dissatisfied with the CCP for a long time for its ruling in every field, even though it was a layman in those fields, and its killing of innocent people during the movement to suppress counter-revolutionaries in 1950 to 1953, and the movement to eliminate counter-revolutionaries in 1955 to 1957. They thought that the CCP had